Hi, my name is Amanda Panacea, and you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This is a community for self-healers, biohackers, practitioners, and any other helping professionals. You're in the right place if you're seeking conversations about how pain becomes passion, the connection between physical, energetic, mental, and our spiritual self, finding your body's ancient wisdom, the latest biohacking technologies, clinical research, and if you just want to nerd out about complex biochemistry and quantum physics. But this is also for entrepreneurs who seek infinite abundance and a supportive community. So pour a cup of King coffee or Sisters tea and let's join the revolution. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am your host, Amanda Panacea, and I'm really excited today to get to sit down and interview Dr. Ashley Beckman. Dr. Ashley has a extensive education. She is trained and educated in epigenetics, traditional Chinese medicine, functional medicine, homeopathy, and acupuncture. She's been working with over 50,000 clients in the last decade or so. And so she's really coming at you from a large body of practitioner, education, and clinical experience. And she uses this to really get to the root cause of what is going on with you and to help you heal on a true cellular level. Dr. Ashley and I really nerd out over the topic of mold and detox and emotional health and the energetic bodies. So I know you're really going to like this conversation. Stay tuned. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am your host, Amanda Panacea, and today I'm really excited to be interviewing Dr. Ashley Beckman. Hi, Dr. Ashley. Thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. Hi. It's good to see you.
Yes. So just like almost everyone else that I've invited on, I saw your stuff on Instagram, which I'm sure is your main way of receiving clients and meeting new people as well at this day and age. But I really resonate with a lot of the work that you do. So I was just thrilled that you said yes to be on.
I'm glad to be on here. Yes, it's always nice to chat with other people, right? And I think we have a lot of similar beliefs and ways we work with people. So it's always lovely to connect.
Yes. So let's get right in. How did you start to be involved in this world of holistic medicine, and what was your pain to passion story?
Sure. So when I was even in high school, I was always doing raw food cleanses and juicing for a week and things like this. So it probably stemmed just out of kind of being a young girl looking to stay what I thought was healthy at the time, right? And so my mom and I were kind of just into healthy things. And then I started reading about all these herbs and food as medicine. And I also noticed that I was someone that I call now, which other people do, like a canary in a coal mine, right? So basically if someone walked by with perfume, I would get a headache. And just as I started to get kind of, I wouldn't call it sick, but more and more symptoms as I got a little older and more sensitive. So same with detergents and things. And I was trying to figure out why. So after I graduated college, I was a business major. I started looking into xenoestrogens and things that mimic hormones. And I just kind of sent me down this whole path. And then I cleaned up my whole personal care line, right? Like everything I use, threw kind of stuff away. And I couldn't believe that there were all these things, right, that were banned in Europe that are not banned here. And again, this was 20 years ago. So there weren't a lot of options, but there were still some. And that kind of started my path, I guess. And I ended up even actually having a skincare company with one of my best friends in grad school. We were there for acupuncture and herbs. And again, there weren't a lot of clean lines really then. Now there's tons and lots of cool people making really beautiful lines. So I was really into it, and it was just a big passion of mine. And that was all before I actually started to feel really not well. So
yeah. And so you went to school for business and you said marketing, right? Yes. When did you decide, okay, I'm going to go on to get a degree in, was it TCM? Was that your first one?
Yes. So I first started, I worked actually for a naturopath. And so I got really into, she focused a lot on Lyme and used a lot of energetic machine. There was a machine called the
Mm,
Quantum. So I used to go do this in high school as my
wow.
practitioner. And so then I was running and doing this for clients as well. And I thought this is really cool. So I started to study homeopathy and detoxes for especially Lyme and things like that, and other chemicals and mold way back then. And then my homeopathic teacher just said, you love this. You need to go get some more education. And if you love herbs, Chinese medicine is the place for learning about herbs, right? And then the theory is amazing, because I do believe that our emotions have a big impact on why we maybe stay sick, right? And the organs that are associated with them. So Chinese medicine theory is really cool for that. And so at that point, I was combining homeopathy and supplements and Chinese herbs. And then later on, when I went back to get my doctorate, I wrote my thesis on epigenetics and nutrigenomics. So I just love combining the very modern things, right, with our functional medicine labs that are pretty cool now, with kind of energetic, and then also Chinese medicine, ancient theory.
Yeah, I totally agree. So you just mentioned a lot of things here
Yeah.
that are really cool. So could you just explain what is the big difference between TCM as traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine?
Oh, sure. So, well, one thing that I love about Chinese medicine, besides the emotional component, right? So each organ has emotions connected. And so we never know exactly if damage to an organ creates an emotional response, or if an emotional response that we have or stored emotions could damage that organ, right? So it's figuring that out. And then the other really cool part of it too is the meridian system, of where it's kind of like these little energetic highways all over the body. And you can tap into places where there's stuck or stagnant energy and try to release the flow. So, but it really is really cool how this medicine that's been around for 5,000 years, it actually is still very applicable today. And it's cool because we see it spoken about a bit more now. Like, people talk about liver stagnation, but there's all these other organs that have all these things going on. And especially when we look at if someone has, say, asthma, and then we look at the lungs, or see skin issues, we look at the lungs and or the bowel. There's so many things. And it's just, to me, really great diagnostic tool, and another lens at how I look through my clients to see what's going on and tailor what they need. Because, when I studied Western nutrition and even sort of holistic medicine and holistic things, you don't look at if something's hot or cold per se, right? And we know with a client, like if you have a cold female, she shouldn't really be having salads and smoothies. So I love Chinese medicine gives us the taste and temperature and organs for herbs and food.
Yeah, and that kind of goes along with like Ayurveda and the chakra system. So there's kind of some overlap in those ancient medicines with the energy body, the heat, and like constitutions or whatnot.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot.
Yeah. And
Because
so
yeah,
go
sorry, I was gonna
ahead.
say, like, you'll have somebody, and in our world of functional medicine, someone will say, oh, they need sauna 5 times a week at 165. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, not this client, right? They'll be so depleted and exhausted that even if you're trying to get out a toxin, you've just destroyed their chi and their energy. And so yeah, constitution is really key. And it's just a great way to customize based on the client's needs.
Yeah. And so you're also trained in acupuncture as well. And this is a big way that energy can also be moved. Could you explain how acupuncture works?
Sure. So yeah, so there's a meridian system, which is the way energy flows in the body. And there are about 600 or so acupuncture points on the body. And by using a needle, or sometimes I'll use an essential oil on a point, or even just a little, they have seeds and stickers too. You basically direct the body to focus its energy on that point. And the point either connects to the way energy flows or a specific organ. And so we do that to help rebalance the body. But it also helps calm the nervous system down. There's all these things that people talk about for vagus nervous system support and vagal tone, and acupuncture is amazing for that. So we'll forget about that one a lot, but it's one of the best.
Yeah, when I was really sick and I literally was just tight and like shaking and very, very much in sympathetic overdrive. My muscles and my shoulders were so tight, they were burning. And so I went to this acupuncturist who did the needle like into the muscle until it started twitching. What is that called and how does that work? Because it completely relieved the tightness until, of course, it came back, and I had to keep going until I was feeling better. But yeah, how is it going into the muscle?
It's grabbing the chi. So like, it's crazy too, because that was probably gallbladder 21, which is like this high point here, sort of on the shoulder. And it like, you can feel it when it pulls it in. It's called de chi, which is kind of funny, but it's DE. And it basically will like grab the needle, and then that's activating that, and it will then release the muscle. And that's a really, really strong one. It's one of the ones you can't use if you're pregnant, because it has such a downward action of like chi releasing. And so it's funny when there's people that say, oh, acupuncture doesn't do anything. We actually have like a small handful of points that will cause a miscarriage.
Oh, wow.
If you're pregnant. And so it moves energy in your body, and very strongly. So it's definitely very impactful. But like with any kind of modality, some bodies really love it and some could kind of take it or leave it. And so, a lot of the people that really, really love it, I think it's an amazing modality to really keep in their toolbox regularly, because it has so many amazing benefits.
Yeah. And I'm one of those people that doesn't really feel much with a lot of interventions. And so when I found this acupuncturist that could get the muscle twitching, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, everything relaxed, I was like, I finally found something that works. I was so excited.
I know, it's interesting too. There's a lot, I think there's people, right, that people work with, and they're like, oh, I love this. And, I'm again, one that I don't feel a lot from a lot of things. And so it makes me a good test patient, right. On supplements and interventions. But then when I do feel a strong reaction from something, it's like, oh, this is what my body loves and probably needs.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. And so comparing TCM to, then you went on to study epigenetics. This is another we could have an hours and hours of conversation about epigenetics, but have you seen epigenetics when you were learning that? Have you seen it validating TCM? Like, wow, they were right all along. This is totally what's happening.
Yeah, you know what? It's, I guess in one way I would say yes, because so much of epigenetics is that we have the power, over our lifestyle to make these changes that affect our genetic expression. So Chinese medicine is all about lifestyle, right? Between Qigong, like movement, meditation, herbs, supplement, like what they call it, herbs, the food we eat. And so those are actually all the same things that we use in epigenetics, right? On the lifestyle side to implement change. So I think that they go really well together, right? And we're always trying to find these healthy habits for our clients to try to minimize disease expression and turn on all of the favorable genes. And so actually, Chinese medicine has so many of those practices just woven into it. And people forget that they just focus maybe on acupuncture, which is only one piece, right? We have a lot of other modalities that we use, but a huge piece is it's like gentle movement, right? And then some sort of calming the mind with meditation and things like that. But yeah, the food is critical, and food is one of the biggest ones with epigenetics too.
Yeah. And so what are the big things that you feel move the needle? Like, have you done multiple epigenetics testing and seen their genes actually start to change and the SNPs present differently?
So yeah, so in the way of doing that, it would be mostly seeing, I guess, their current lab markers change on if they were tending toward like prediabetes or blood markers that are just off with cholesterol or different things like that. But a lot of the ones, since the genetic code will stay the same, it's just how it's expressed. And so we basically, there's other markers that people could look at for like telomere length for aging and things like that. I don't do those as much. You can, it's kind of like fun, but not on, a lot of the times I'm working with people that are pretty sick, and we're trying to like get toxins out of their body. And so I would say where I love the genetics, I use it a lot in the testing that I use, is to see like if they are someone who's more sensitive to mold or Lyme or pesticides and things like that, and how they process toxins. And so then that helps me kind of differentiate where it is in their roadmap of, being more impactful, right? And so what I like to do is see, again, I remind people this is a blueprint of options, right? And possibility. This does not mean that just because you have this gene, you're going to get this, because a lot of people get really nervous, right? Or there's a lot of people that are afraid to even check their genetics. And to me, it's very helpful information. Again, it's not necessary, but I also don't want people to focus in on, oh, I have this and it's going to happen.
Right.
So it's more like, this is here. Let's figure out how we make it not happen. Right.
Yes. Yeah. Your belief of what is going to happen, placebo effect, nocebo effect, manifestation, whatever you want to call it, that is the most important aspect of your health.
Yeah. And people really, they say these things over and over, like, oh, my parents had heart disease, like this. And I just, we're always probably trying to do the same thing of like disassociating someone from a disease or a pattern that either they've been diagnosed with, or now that they've said the story 100 times, like, oh, I'll probably have this because XYZ. Yeah. And we see it even on lab forms that people, like, even when I send out forms, like we ask, does this run some of these things in your family? And that's interesting because it's really infiltrated a lot of places like that.
Yeah. And if you look at the word family and the word familiar, they're rooted in the same thing. So we just perpetuate these patterns over and over again. They're just so subconscious. It's really interesting to see, like in myself and people I know closely, and especially with clients.
Yeah. And that's another, I'd say with that, and then the same of just people really, which we said, but they identify with once they've been diagnosed with something, or they're chasing a diagnosis, right? Like, especially for people that have been sick a while with a mystery illness, which is a lot of probably both of our clients, right? It's just like, oh, but I want to find out, is it mast cell? Is it this? Is it, Lyme? Is it mold? And I'm like, well, it's a lot of them. Like, we just want to know why. I don't care as much all the things you've been diagnosed with. And, because then they really harp in on that and it becomes part of their identity. Right. And I mean, you've been through so much, and it's crazy and helpful to others, right? I'm sure, to see your journey, but it's also that fine line of that people become so obsessed with, like, research, right? It's almost like, unfortunately, people need to be their own advocate now, but then there's so much information and it's conflicting that it's like people are going all these ways, right?
Right. Yeah. The first person that diagnosed me with mast cell, I was like, how dare you? I do not have that. It's not happening. Yeah. Do not tell me that is what's happening. Because I knew the ramifications of like hearing that and thinking it. And I was like, nope, absolutely not. But yeah, the diagnosis, it can help you feel a lot less out of control. You're like, okay, I'm not a mystery anymore. Like, at least there's other people that have this. There's a way to deal with this. There's people that know what this is. Yes. I'm not completely alone. But then, but then, as you said, it becomes, I have this, and this is what I have to do to get well. And then you get attached to, well, this person said I have to do this, this, and this, or I won't get better. And then this other person said I have to do this treatment or I won't get better. And that's where it gets really confusing.
It does. Yeah. And I respect that too on the client side. And then at the same time, it's also important to have faith in your practitioner and trust the process. And also, that it'll take longer than you think, right? And there'll be ups and downs, but at the same time, it's really important to to stick with things. But then of course, if things don't feel right, always have a practitioner that you feel close enough to that you can voice your concerns and ask questions, right? Because this is a big journey for people.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm sure you get it all the time. Somebody coming to you and being like, I had to go through a receptionist to ever speak to the doctor, and they would never let me. And then I never got my questions answered. I'm, just really poor patient care. So
yeah, that's true. And then there's also, I think too, with this age, right, of so much information, there's always they're asking about these random obscure things or something
yeah.
in a post, and I'm like, no, you've already done the most amazing lab. You don't need this $25 lab that I could do for free. You know what I mean? It's and then it's always, what about this? What about this? What about this?
Yeah. What is your opinion on this supplement?
I know.
Well, it looks like a great supplement if it's right for you.
I know. That's my whole thing. Not for you, or maybe, but pretty much always it's, no. And this what you're on is way better, right? This is their great marketing. You can tell they're spending a lot on marketing.
Yeah.
Instagram, right? It's just it's a big space now.
Yeah. Double-edged sword, because the information is out there, but then misinformation is also out there. So
yeah, I know. And I think too, as a health practitioner, I'm more reserved about what I say online, and the fact that, I'm not going to say some water infused with pine leaves, this is an example, is not a stuff that this woman rattled off that it was going to cure. And I just, I said to my client, this is a super light infusion of some herbs and water. There's no way this, maybe strong doses of thyme oil in a capsule, but no, it's not going to cure depression. And it was literally all these things. And I thought, how can someone say all that stuff?
yeah, that's pretty crazy, legally.
Yeah, but they're not, they're not in the medical space. It was just about thyme water.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I think if you're working as the practitioner and selling a health related item, you cannot make claims. But if you're not a practitioner at all and you just make a product, claims galore, I think it is.
Yeah, and then you can't use any medical, you can, whatever it is, support skin is what we can say.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get into the juicy topic of mold, because we were talking before and you said most of your clientele is dealing with mold in some way, shape, or form. And you're in Southern California and I'm in Southern Florida. So there's mold everywhere. And why are some people affected? Why are some people not affected at all? And why are some people in complete denial that they're affected?
Sure. So yeah, so again, I do love the genetics for that piece, partly to just see if someone might be more prone. There's 25% of the population, give or take, that's more prone to getting a very strong reaction from mold, and that they don't clear it from their system as well, right? But I have plenty of clients that even within the same family, a few people have that, and they're just as sick or not as sick as the people who don't. So it's not a be all end all thing, of course, like any genetics tests. But I would say too, a lot of times people, when they come to me, they don't usually come because it's a little different now. Some are coming more because they suspect mold or have gotten a mold test. But most people initially don't know that. They come for Epstein-Barr or Hashimoto's. Those are probably the two big ones that come to me that I always check for mold because I always find it. So, and again, by checking for mold, I mean check in a urine test, right, to see if it's in their body, different than their home. And I would say most people have had mold exposure. I think everybody's lived in a house with mold. It's usually, even like most people as a child grew up with some sort of mold because we just didn't fix things the same way too. And it wasn't a big deal, right? Like everybody, I grew up in Texas. We all had basements. They were flooded all the time and things like that. You know, it's just common. Same if you're in Florida or people that live anywhere near the beach or water, you're just like, oh, it's just musty, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
I think what happens though is now, again, as we've seen, people like I'm in my mid 40s and it's like people are just getting more and more sick, right? Because our body burden, we're just exposed to so many things. And this is probably somebody's, multiple exposure to mold. And they're just now, it's like catching up to them, right? A lot of people are getting, I think, I would say it's also sad to me too, because there's so many kids that are getting chronically ill, but they're very young, right? We
Mm-hmm.
see it's a different thing with autism, but basically like I see a lot of kids with a lot of neurological issues and tics and things now that was unusual. And a lot of the sensitivities to food have gotten really crazy too. So to me, the signs are just that our bodies are overwhelmed and can't process all of the things. And, our food and air and water is just not as clean as it could be. So it's just, I think, becoming more of a problem. And so a lot of times what happens is when I go into someone's history, pretty much everyone has had some place that they lived in where they might have suspected mold. Some people don't, but if you say too, or if you have you gone on vacation to Hawaii or Florida or somewhere tropical and it felt musty or smelled musty, I mean, most people have that in their history somewhere. But again, I always check with labs, and then I have a quiz too, but it's really important, I think, if possible, to see what kinds we're dealing with and what levels. And so it's just something that I'm seeing more and more common. And it's something that in the last probably 5 years, then I started testing, and it was just really, really common with chronically ill clients, which are predominantly what I work with. A lot of people, they don't know what's wrong, or they have this virus, or they have an autoimmune and they don't know, or I want to figure out why. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very, very common though, unfortunately. And yeah, a lot of people try to run away from it, which is not possible, especially, you know, people think like, oh, I'll move to Arizona. It's like, well, any home that has water, which is every single house that has a bathroom, right, or a kitchen, you can get leaks. And just a leak alone can make some people sick. A lot of, if you have a really strong immune system and you haven't had maybe a lot of trauma or things like that, there's so many layers to why people get sick and stay sick. But it's unfortunately very common that most people in the home are affected. It's just to varying degrees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I also think it has a lot to do with, like you said, that not only just that toxic burden, but also like the clogged drainage pathways. For me, no problems with mold. I lived in Florida, definitely lived in places that had mold. Never got sick until after I had hepatitis A, which is a virus that inflames the liver. And my liver enzymes were still very high when I started being exposed, and I got sick like right away. And it was immediate. And I didn't put two and two together until I remembered that mold is fat soluble and your liver has to process it. And so with the abundance of fatty liver and just the liver not getting the nutrients it needs in our society, I think that's another big reason too.
Yeah, and it's most people just don't. It's interesting where sometimes you can pinpoint it to one instance, right? Like, but a lot of times people can't. They're just it's like they get progressively worse, I guess. And then like I said, sometimes it's like the last home that they're in is the one, and then they're pretty sick at that point. But it has been kind of brewing for a while.
Have you had to give up coffee for health reasons? Maybe because of the stress it was putting on your adrenals, maybe because it was messing with your sleep, maybe because you felt terrible after drinking it, or maybe because you were told coffee had mold on the beans and you needed to stay away from mold. Well, what if I told you there's an organic, mycotoxin-free, quality coffee that contains reishi spores or Ganoderma lucidum? Ganoderma lucidum helps to modulate your immune system, adapt to stress, balance hormones, and doesn't give you the jitters or shakes like regular coffee used to. Sounds too good to be true, right? It's called King Coffee by the company Organo. And King Coffee came into my life when I was struggling with chronic hives, full body eczema, and mast cell activation syndrome. I hadn't drank coffee in years because it made me feel anxious, shaky, and clammy. So I had no expectations that drinking King Coffee would be any different. However, I decided to give it a try after seeing lots of amazing practitioners talk about the benefits of reishi online. I tried a 7-day sample and the chronic hives were gone by day 5. I was in shock. After that, I dove into the research on reishi and found that there are over 3,000 peer-reviewed PubMed clinical trials using reishi Ganoderma as an intervention. The company Organo also has a patent protected on their harvesting process. They double crack open the spore shells, which makes them up to 80% more potent than the body of the reishi, which is usually used in other reishi products. This also makes the spores 90% more bioavailable for your body to use. If you would like to try King Coffee, visit thehealerrevolution.myorganogold.com, or for a 7-day trial, you can check out my link tree on my Instagram at Amanda Panacea. And so since people don't always know, why does it matter if it was a recent mold exposure or if it was 20 years ago? How does mold stay in the body?
Yeah, I mean, for most people, it just stays there until you've done something specific for mold to get it out, right? I had done tons of cleanses and detoxes and things like that, but a lot of them weren't specific to mold. And I think that's the biggest, right? One of the biggest misconceptions is that our body actually can filter all these things out, but these are very strong biotoxins that are really impactful on multiple organ systems. And so it just kind of depends on where it ends up lodging in your body, right? And the effect. And we usually have a weak system, right? Some people it's respiratory, a lot of people it's digestive or neurological. And usually it'll impact that in different ways for different people, which is why it's very confusing. It's not like every single person in the family gets asthma or it's chronic sinus infections. It's usually, a couple kids have chronic UTIs, the dad has some digestive issues, or the mom gets chronic sinuses. Not usually that way, but you know what I mean? It shows up in different ways, and usually the kids and the mom are the hardest hit, I'd say, unless there was a gentleman that had like a very weak constitution, but often they don't, right? Or they just minimize their symptoms and downplay it.
Yeah, my boyfriend, he was like, how come I wasn't affected by the mold that I lived in? I'm like, look in the mirror. Yes, you were. You have chronic stomach issues. You've got this going on. You've got this. Your liver is fatty. It's just a totally different manifestation.
And I think too, women were very much in touch with their bodies, right? And our body changes every week just with our hormones. And so we're used to, like taking stock and seeing what's going on, what's changed, and like what's new and what symptom was there. And men, I think they don't have that. So they're just generally, this is very general. There are some very in touch with their body, men, but I don't know that many of them. And it's interesting too, because it's so odd that, one pathogen can affect people so differently. And I think that's just a big misconception of how people downplay their symptoms, because they don't ever equate, mold with migraines or mold with joint pain or mold with digestive issues, right? It doesn't make sense. So people just think, oh, sinuses maybe, or allergies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what are some of the most important steps you would say if you were exposed to mold? What am I going to do next?
Sure. So I would say one of the first things to do is get the proper testing to see what you're dealing with and maybe the extent, because if somebody just is exposed like on a minimal basis, right? Like at a hotel on a trip or something, a lot of people can deal with that and not become chronically ill. But I also would, our home environment is so important to make sure that that's clean, because a lot of people, it could be their bathroom that's by their bedroom. So then they actually are exposed to quite a bit all night. And the accumulation is what makes it extra bad for their system. So I mean, I'm a big fan of having a really good air purifier, and also taking stock of kind of like your home health, right? If you do smell anything musty, then 100% get it checked out. Also kind of be mindful of the top areas like bathroom and kitchen and laundry room. I lived in a house that was so much mold, and none was visible, and you couldn't smell anything. So I had to, you basically, if you start to feel sick and you don't know why, it's time to investigate, right? And the first place is usually to check your body and work with somebody who can check these things. And luckily, it's not hard. I mean, a urine test any child can do now, right? It's so simple. They can be expensive, but at least they are available, good, and easy to do from home, right? Those are a lot of barriers right there. So it's also important, right? There's a whole different kind of situation if you're exposed to mold and it's there. And then, I am a big proponent of getting it checked out by a mold company to just see if it's in your body and you don't know if this was, current or from your past. I do think it's important to get your home checked if you can. Not everybody can. And then there's other people that I recommend to help them navigate through that too, right? Because it can be an expensive process. And again, the whole thing isn't to keep, you can't run away from mold. Like it's really challenging. And again, I've moved from a place, but then people become obsessed and they have all of this fear around mold too, which is a whole nother thing.
I like to call that mold PTSD.
Exactly. Yeah. Because, people, we have, our brain starts thinking, oh, do I smell this mold? Is there mold here? And then you start to go down a really dark place, especially if you can't leave your home, right? You can't think that your home is killing you and
right.
making you sick. And then that just gets you stuck in this fight or flight, which is you're not going to get better, right?
It's like worst. Yeah. That's a surefire way to just stay chronically ill.
Yes. And so, yeah, I mean, I do the things of like keeping the home, like cleaning the air. There's a lot of things to clean your home regularly, and then the body, making sure that you're doing things to clean it out of your body. But again, I would say that really should be done with the help of a practitioner or, someone who's very well-versed in mold. I get a lot of clients who have been working with somebody, they work with them a year, 2 years, and it's still very much there. But again, I would say it was probably not the right protocol for that individual. And so it's not an easy thing. It's not like you just buy this little mold kit and you're good for 2 months.
Right. Or start with lots of antifungals and take nystatin and don't open drainage pathways. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a big process and then a lot of different layers, but it's, there are a lot of things to do too. And we just also want to make sure people aren't so freaked out, right? That's a big, big piece, that people just stay very, very sick because they keep perpetuating the fear around the mold too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially with any other toxin too. I mean, heavy metals, right? Like we know a lot of things too. It's like something will be picked up in, like, oh, there's metals in chocolate. Well, of course there's metal in chocolate. Like it's grown in the ground and it absorbs them, right? And it's the same with your vegetables, right? So it's just very tricky because people, we do get a lot of information and things spread, but there's so much marketing around mold and it's very, very fear-based, right? So I think you have to be mindful too of maybe the type of practitioner you work with or the advice that you take, because there's a very huge range online.
Yeah.
From like, throw everything away and live in a tent in your yard to, there's a lot to do. You can do on your own and you can clean things up. And yes, maybe there are certain things you need to toss depending on your individual situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something I'm really passionate about, is no fear-based marketing.
Sad.
It's it's really triggering, and everyone's like, just set boundaries with social media, but when you're that sick, you're desperate for answers, and it's just, for most people, that's really hard. So
Yeah.
yeah. And I also like to tell people, like, I didn't move anywhere. My boyfriend brought all his stuff from the moldy home except for his bed, and I still got better. So you don't have to get rid of everything.
No, and I went through this myself, and I made a lot of choices, right, based on, I mean, education. I understand too, like this is the area of specialty that I work with the most, right? But I knew what to do in the body before this happened to me personally. I didn't I didn't know all the ins and outs of what to do with all of my belongings. And because in my particular instance, it was in our HVAC system. So that means it was in like every room in the house. Like we stopped testing because it was so high everywhere. And I just thought, okay, we're good. We know it's everywhere. So, but you have to, I still kept books. I still kept things like I washed all of my daughter's stuffed animals. You know what I mean? I was not in the camp of like toss everything because there was one spore of
Yeah.
black. You know what I mean? And I mean, there's a lot more of that, but you know what I'm saying? It's like when
Yeah.
when I was going through and reading all these things initially, I just thought, there's no way that this is like what's required, right? I mean, I'm not hauling a dumpster to take everything inside my home and start over, right? But did I buy new beds? Yes, right? Like certain things you do. But, and again, it's very individual, and that's what I talk to my clients about too. And then also there's a lot of people who know these things, the ins and outs really well. And it's important to align yourself, right? I think with someone who's on the similar page or path as you, that is also the same kind of mindset.
Yeah. Again, going back to those beliefs, if you believe you're working with the right person, if you trust them, if you believe you're on the right path, then you will be. If you don't think so, if you're constantly questioning yourself, if you don't feel heard, you're going to be met back with that resistance. That's shutting down the nervous system, which is shifting your whole immune system. It's shifting your detox pathways.
Yeah.
So
It's the same. I talk about this too, and I'm sure you do as well. It's like, because I'm a huge advocate of not watching the news, right?
Yeah.
But plus, all of this information that's fear-based social media is another version of bad news, right? And scary news. And so it is 100% impacting our immune system with that, which the neuropsychoimmunology, like it literally, if you see something fearful about mold, like your immune system starts to tank. And then how does that help your healing process? Not at all.
Right, exactly.
It's tricky and difficult at the same time, but definitely a required step in the process of getting better.
Yeah. And so what advice would you give to somebody who is one of the people who are just have become so sensitive, like with the chemical sensitivities or environmental food? How do you use a lot of homeopathy with those people, and how do you kind of go slowly with them?
Yeah, I use homeopathy probably more than other things. And then again, food, well, I mean, the right food that's not reactive to them. But as you know, there's a lot of people that react to kind of everything, especially if you have mast cell or other things, right? And again, looking into something which like primal trust or some sort of brain retraining to make it so that they're just not seeing the world as so reactive, or they're not so reactive to everything in the world, right? So I think that there's a big piece that needs to be addressed, right, of regulating their nervous system. So if that's acupuncture, all the different ways, right? There's some other really cool tools as well, and primal trust or DNRS, any different things that they need to look at. But yeah, sometimes, I mean, I tend to have the super, super sensitive clients where they take a drop of a homeopathic medicine, right? Where the whole thing is 30 drops is a normal dose. Or basically we take a pinch of a binder, right? Or I have some clients that just put things on topically. Honestly, it's like they're so afraid of ingesting something and getting a reaction, right? And so it's like obviously there's work to do in that regard, but I work with clients on the way that they also feel safe and comfortable moving forward in their process, right? In their detox journey. So, but generally, if someone is that sensitive, 100%, we have to make sure that their drainage is working and functioning well.
Yeah. And so this goes back to just basic foundational human lifestyle practices,
Yeah,
not the sexy stuff that everybody wants to do, like the super boring stuff.
and that's what I was seeing over and over again. So actually, whenever someone meets for us to work together, the first thing I start them on is a 3-month foundational program, right? And so we're making sure and looking at, and everyone always just glosses, not everyone, but people gloss over these things. And I did myself too. It's like, you need to make sure they're getting to bed early. And this is not 11 or 12, right? Ideally between 9 and 10, if possible. They're getting clean water, the right food for their body, movement, stress reduction, and then doing something that's either like gratitude or something that is just making them happy to be alive, right? Something because most people are so downtrodden when they're in this cycle most people, it's like 10 years, right? They've been dealing with things and seen 10 plus practitioners and tried everything. And to me, it's like often we need to take a step back, right? And look at what they're doing. And often people too are stacking so many detox things, right? They're doing like coffee enemas and saunas and IVs and like everything at once, not at once, but like a lot. And I think we actually at some point are just overwhelming our body and not actually letting it process these things.
Yeah. And that's that desperation. I got to fix this. I've got to do everything. I've got to hurry it up. I tell everyone, doing more things faster does not make you feel better faster. It's actually the opposite.
Yeah. And I think that's not what's talked about a lot, right? Like these are all these cool things you can do, like ozone and, it's everything. We have a lot of tools at our disposal for sure, but we also have the body getting overwhelmed quite easily, I think. And a lot of the times it's just, as we know, it's like you're just flooding your body with all of these things that it needs to process because you've killed too much too fast.
Yeah. And as someone who doesn't see a lot of change from interventions, ozone was the one thing that actually irks me. Of everything I've done, all the crazy stuff with just ozone. So,
yeah. And a lot of my clients, if they can handle it, I say great. But most of them, I just said, please don't do whatever they're recommending at the ozone place.
Yeah.
It's not going to work for you. And if they do, they usually feel really bad. Right. And it's just, I don't know. I think a lot of times the people don't have sensitive clients. And so and then the patient feels like dismissed, right? Or they just feel like, oh, well, they said this never happens. I'm like, but it happens to all my clients, right? That's why I don't do that. Or that's why I said, please tell them you want like a fraction of a dose just as a starting dose. And it's, again, there's just such a range and everything has to be so individualized. I think it's really important to remember that and to go slowly and ease into things.
Yeah. And if you think it's going to take 3 months and you'll just be back to your old life, think again.
Yeah. As you know, too, it's a tough pill to swallow when you tell someone, it's probably going to be a few years. Or again, this depends on how sick people are, but a lot of times people have a lot of layers, right? It's not like someone just has some gut imbalances and a little candida, right? If we see that, then we know we have to deal with a lot of other things, even on a more simple case, right? There's still going to be probably parasites and viruses and other things. Right. And that's not even the emotional side, right?
Yeah. The emotional side is the hardest because it's almost like a death of the old self. And you have to, unfortunately and fortunately, actually start to do the inner work, whether you're ready or not. Like your body has spoken. This is your time.
And your body, a lot of times too, your body has made it and forced you to look at whatever it is, right? A lot of people are so sick that it's in their face and they can't continue with their normal life, right? And so I think that's probably also what prompts people to try to do things faster, right? Is they would just want to get, obviously everyone wants to get better faster,
Of
but
course, yeah.
and they want one thing to take, and it's just not that way. I wish, it's like, I'm sure for you, we wish we could just take everything away for somebody, right? And it's not, unfortunately, it's not the journey or the path. And there's a lot of work to do on the end as the client and the patient.
Yeah. And it's bio individual, like from a practitioner's perspective, working with that person, but then they also, as like the client on the other side of it, you have to understand that you could pay millions of dollars for the quote unquote best treatments. But if you don't actually do your part of the bargain, that inner work, and discover what was the thing that caused you to get sick in the first place, it doesn't matter what the intervention is.
Yeah.
It's always the emotional, the physical, the spiritual, the energetic. It's all of those things.
Yeah, because, and that's the whole thing with a lot of these is there are plenty of people that mold doesn't bother them, right? They can live in a house and no issue, and, or whatever it is, they can have Lyme and there's never been they don't have a symptom, right? It's crazy, but we like certain things will lodge onto a weakness like that we have, right? And, or some traumatic event brings a bunch of things up or whatever it might be, but it is so individual, and then what's going to help you is individual, and it's just a lot of different aspects at one time. And that's the whole point of having a practitioner, right? Like, look at this, try to put it into perspective, and then give you the tools to help you on that long journey.
Yeah, it's impossible to see your blind spot. That's why it's a blind spot. So having somebody to point that out to you is always just really invaluable. This is something that came up for me today. So
that's true. And it's, again, people are, I think that you see this too. It's like there's all these chat rooms for whatever the disease is that people have, right, that they've been diagnosed with, and where sometimes it's interesting or helpful information, I think overall it's not, and it just keeps people stuck in this place of actually not getting better, right? And that's a big piece I think as a practitioner, is trying to get our clients to get out of those and trying to get them to stop talking about being sick all the time, right, to everybody that will listen, because that is a big piece, and really finding kind of like your team and maybe sticking to that as like, this is who I talk about this with, because they're a professional as well and they have experience helping other people. So I know that that's a tricky subject, and everyone doesn't really like that information because they're in a lot of these rooms, right? But
yeah, I couldn't agree more. Not helpful. It doesn't matter what the group is. If you look at somebody's question and you look at the comments, everything is a different answer. There's not one single thing that's the same. So I don't know how that could be helpful at all. It's got to be so confusing.
Yes, yeah, and I think that it does. It adds that overwhelm too, and just thinking like, oh, I've never tried that. I've never tried that.
Yeah.
And even in therapy, I haven't tried peptides. Like there's an endless supply of options, right? And they're all very expensive too, right? It's not like these things are readily available for the public and an easy way to get either.
Yeah. And so on that topic, what are your favorite like cool interventions?
Oh, sure. So again, it's very individual. And this is why I think it's cool to just, again, tailor it to the person. But because I love heat, and sauna is probably my favorite. Infrared sauna is my favorite. And I'm cautious with how the length of time, the heat, and time of day and things like that for when I'm prescribing it, I guess I'd say, like in a certain amount to clients. I know some people love cold plunging. I cannot. I just, it's okay. But I think it's this thing too. Like there's heat shock proteins, cold shock proteins. And if you take constitution and if you have people, right, that are more always cold, the cold to me is not their method that I think will help them, right? That's when I go with sauna, but there's plenty of people that have a ton of heat and that kind of inflammation. And I think that the cold would be great for them. And let's see what else. I'm a big fan of methylene blue. I use that quite a bit for the right person again. And what else? Trying to think of, I am a fan of tracking things because I think a lot of people, be it like an Oura Ring or continuous glucose monitor, different things. I think we have a lot of thoughts about what we're doing and how effective it is. And it's good to see when it's not, right? Or if it is. So there's a bunch of people too that really think like, oh, I can eat these foods and it doesn't bother me, or, I'm good. And I think it's nice to have some data, right? Besides lab tests and things. The other thing that I think is really important is to get some labs kind of regularly to just see your progress. I don't know if that's not really like an intervention. I'm trying to think what else.
What are your favorite labs?
So I do use Vibrant America a lot for their mold. I think it's the best because it has like almost double the amount of markers of what I used to use. Same, I love the organic acid test. That's probably my favorite test if anyone can only do one, because we can find out so much from there. I love the hair mineral test, love that one. And let's see, I do the total toxin test from Vibrant, so it has all the pesticides too. And then if someone has a lot of metals on that one, then I'm like, oh, it's not a lot usually come up on there, but the hair mineral shows some good ones. And those are my favorite. And then I do genetics testing too. So I love to throw that in to just see what we're possibly working with. And then of course, if someone needs like regular blood work to look at it for thyroid and iron, and then all regular markers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, and I think, let's see, what else? I mean, I think people need some good quality targeted supplements, right? Like I, for years, only did herbal cleanses and detoxes. And so when I this was a long time ago, I did a Great Plains total toxin test, but I thought, I'm only going to do it just to see, because I run it with my clients. There's not going to be much on here because I detoxed 4 times a year with these week-long things since high school. And they said my test was one of the worst they'd ever seen. And so this was prior to genetics testing, right? This was I'd never used glutathione. It was only herbs and food, right?
Mm-hmm.
And man, and that was a huge awakening moment, because I just thought, what have I been doing all these years? Like it wasn't even, I did this whole preconception detox. I thought I cleaned out my whole body before I had my daughter. No, it was so bad. And again, it came back to just, I wasn't using the right things for my body. Right. And then, I mean, plus I live in LA, so there are a lot more toxins here, but I had done so much to clean out my system, I had thought, but
yeah,
apparently not.
Yeah, eye-opening for sure.
Yeah, no, I think it's great for labs, right? Like you also, again, I want people to go by symptoms and how they feel, right? But at the same time, it's really good to actually know that the things that you've been working on are cleared out. And I don't do a lot of repeat testing like that quickly, because often, it gets worse before it's better, because you're dumping a bunch of stuff into your system, right? So that can be, patients can look at that and be concerned, where from our side, we know like, oh, this is actually a good thing. Unless you're getting more mold exposure or things like that. But yeah.
Yeah, I definitely see that too. There's a big influx in like how much is coming out and how bad things look. And then like, especially with like busting open biofilms and letting all that stuff out. And then over time, it starts to kind of taper off. So just an FYI for anyone who's worried about that.
I mean, of course, if I saw a test and didn't really know that, you would think, oh my gosh, I'm worse. And that's
right.
happens a lot, right? For clients is they get really nervous. They don't want anything to show that they're worse, right? When they're doing all these things to get better.
And also from an emotional standpoint, when you finally relax, when you finally jump out of that sympathetic drive and into like rest and digest, then your body has the time, the resources to go clean everything up. So you may actually get sick. This is why people get sick on vacation or right after finals. When you finally relax, the body's like, now we can take care of that bacteria infection.
That's what I say all the time, because clients, they get so mad, they'll get sick on their vacation. I said, yeah, I figured you would. Like,
yeah.
you actually are on a tropical vacation somewhere, not going crazy with all of the work in your normal life. And I just said, of course you got sick.
Yeah.
It's very common. I see it all the time.
Yeah.
Body finally is able to process all that stress that you've been like experiencing, but not experiencing. Right?
Exactly. Shoving it down, ignoring it, pushing through.
Yep.
Awesome. So I know you're in Southern California. Do you see people in person and online, or mostly in person, or how does your practice look?
All online. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Everything's virtual. I don't practice acupuncture anymore. I worked in a very busy practice for a long time. And so I saw a lot of people, and I basically was always obsessed with toxins, right? In some form. So it's more from personal care to, you know what I mean? Like those kinds of preservative toxins to, then it was, mold and Lyme and all of the viruses. I just think they're fascinating. And I think that it's very interesting, how our body, especially the biofilms, right? So fascinating that they basically create their own little protective armor so that we can't kill them. But basically, I've always had this, interest in them. And so even though I was in a practice and like was mostly focused a lot on Chinese medicine theory, there's still a lot of that involved in Chinese medicine. But then once a lot of these cool tests became available in the functional medicine world, I was so excited.
Yeah.
So I love that. And so I combine kind of the Chinese medicine with the genetics and the current functional medicine testing. But most of my clients, we look for toxins. And again, there's people that metals are a big deal, but I found that a lot of people, mold is such an impactful piece that's a big part of what I focus on if it's in their history, right? In their body. But that's the whole reason I created the foundational program, is to see what are you actually dealing with, and also let's get you on a good track in order to then put you in a good place to be able to do the deeper work that will be needed to clear these things out.
Right. You got to have the foundations to release.
Yes.
Can't release things in that stressed, hypervigilant state.
No, and that's kind of where everybody is, right? And if you've been doing things a long time, we notice that our nervous systems are on high alert a lot.
Yeah. I totally get leaving the practice, moving everything online. I'm all online. I'll never go back to working in a place ever again. For one, the overhead lighting. That is my main complaint at any office or any building.
That's so funny. Yeah, all the fluorescents.
I hate overhead lighting.
And I never saw a window, right? Like I was in an office, I saw 30 people a day. It was like a, up, down 100 times a day, crazy person. And now I get to basically, spend targeted time with my clients. I work with them closely for, year plus, if not more, because a lot of the people have a lot going on. And it's just, I really love it. And it's a very different type of practice, but I've been working toward it for the last 5 years. So then when all of this happened, then people understood it and got it, where I have been doing this for a while, but it was, people didn't understand, didn't know what Zoom was, didn't know any of the things.
Yeah.
Why would I go see you online when I could just go see you in an office? So it actually was a nice transition for me, and what I had been, like the dream practice I'd been trying to build for the last 5 years. So cool.
Amazing. Well, I'm glad you now have an aligned practice that also is aligned with your own lifestyle habits and goals and aspirations and all of that.
Yes. Yeah.
You definitely seem like a very caring and well-rounded practitioner, doctor. So I'm sure all of your patients are very happy.
I hope so. Yeah. And as you know, a lot of them have struggled for so long, and they've been through so many practitioners, and they've been to some really big ones too, right? With a lot of popularity. And it's, I think everyone is so unique as you do, and it really takes just a very customized approach and a lot of care, right? A lot of people have been sick and dismissed for many, many years, even by not alone doctors, but like by their family, right? Even a lot of times the family members don't really think that they're sick, or they're faking it or things. It's terrible to not feel like seen and heard when you're not who you were before, right? And your symptoms are taking over.
Yeah. So what is your final words? What would be like your advice if somebody's out there listening that is listening, maybe because I'm going to put in the title, this is going to be about mold. What would your advice be to that person?
Sure. So again, I do think that mold exposure is probably the most impactful root cause of many chronic issues, and actually just issues that I've seen. So that is why I'm so passionate about educating people about it. I have a really good mold resource guide. And so if you possibly suspect mold exposure, or if you have some sort of chronic or mystery illness, definitely seek out someone who is very knowledgeable in dealing with mold, because a lot of people aren't, and they say that they can work on it, but people need to really go to someone that actually has a lot of experience with mold, and that's a big piece of what they do, I'd say. But yeah, I've unfortunately seen it be the most impactful biotoxin or, outside influence in someone's practice. I'd say, of course, outside of nervous system, but the mold is something that is very targeted in multiple conditions and symptoms.
Yeah, I would agree as well.
Yeah.
Well, today has been just so lovely. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you. You're just so knowledgeable in so many different areas. So I know everyone's going to love this episode.
Thank you for having me on.
Yes, for sure. Tell everyone where to find you and how to work with you.
Sure. So easiest is usually on Instagram. It's Dr. Ashley Beckman, or my website is Dr. Ashley. So drashley.com. And I always offer a complimentary 15-minute phone call to see if we're a good fit. And I have a lot of information on Instagram. I think that's mostly where people find me. And if you want to just check out, videos to get an idea of kind of how I work. And, I think that's the thing, you want to resonate with your practitioner, because it is a close relationship you're going to have with them. And so you want to just make a good connection. And it's a really important thing, your health. And it's something that you want someone to also be very mindful of you and take care of you. And I would love to help people. That's my passion, is trying to make things easier, because this is a very complicated subject with this chronic health and anybody's health. So try to make it simple and doable. I'm never going to shame anybody for their habits, but we just want to make things easier and try to make it so that we can turn your health around.
Beautiful. All right, Dr. Ashley, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you everyone for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I am just so thrilled that you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This has been a huge passion project for me, and super therapeutic on top of that, helping me to use my voice and connect with other like-minded individuals. So if you're enjoying the podcast, please like and subscribe. Please share on social media or with your audience or friends or loved ones. I truly appreciate it. It does take a lot of time and financial costs to run the podcast, and it is not a moneymaker, let me tell you. So if you are enjoying this, I would truly appreciate your support just by sending me a post, a like, and a subscribe. Thank you so much.